The empty table by the kitchen door wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Catherine Walker is 31, a prestige attorney who just won the biggest case of her year. Tonight, she isn't in a courtroom. She's a Black mother taking her 8-year-old son to dinner. She books the table in her own professional name. The manager reads it twice, then walks her past 4 empty tables to the worst seat in the room. Her son, Elijah, is 8. He wears a small silver dinosaur pin on his collar. He knocks a single fork onto the marble. That's all it takes. The manager smiles and orders the boy to finish his meal outside, on the terrace, so he won't bother the other guests. Catherine stands. Every instinct says fight. Instead, she takes her son's hand and kneels beside him on cold stone. What she doesn't know yet is who owns this restaurant. A quiet Korean man named Yoon Sung-ho, 38, the president of the Hanul Group. A black dragon tattoo climbs the right side of his neck, hidden under his collar, and he is about to walk through the glass and see his wife kneeling on the floor. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Catherine signed the last page and slid it across the conference table before the opposing counsel could clear his throat again. 2 years of litigation, folded into a single settlement. She capped her pen. Across the glass wall, the junior associates pretended not to watch, and she let them watch. Then she stood, gathered her folder, and walked out at exactly 6 o'clock, because tonight she had a reservation and a son. Elijah was waiting in the lobby with the receptionist, swinging his legs off a leather chair too big for him. He'd combed his own hair. He'd done it badly, one side of his soft, dark curls flattened and the other springing loose. And he'd clipped the little silver dinosaur pin to his lapel, the way he always did, before something he considered important. "Did you win?" he asked. "We settled." "Is that winning?" "It's better than winning." She held out her hand. "It's certain." He took it. His fingers were sticky from something. She didn't ask. They drove across the city as the light went amber over the buildings. Elijah narrated the whole way, a lecture on which dinosaurs could have survived the asteroid if they'd only been smaller. She listened, made the right sounds, and thought about nothing except the fact that she had earned this. Her name on the door of the firm's newest partnership, a boy who still wanted her to hear about dinosaurs. One dinner to market, at the best table she could book. She had built her whole life out of not needing anyone to hand her things. She was 31. She'd argued a corporate fraud case in front of a panel of men who kept calling her young lady until the 3rd day, when she stopped being young lady and started being a problem. She had a corner office and a mother's cross around her neck, and a son who thought gold burgers were a scientific question. Nothing about the evening required permission. That was the whole point of the evening. She had booked it herself, in her own name. Catherine Walker, the name that closed rooms and opened them. Miriam sat on the top 3 floors of the Hanul Tower, glass and pale stone, the kind of place that photographed like a cathedral. She'd chosen it on purpose. Her husband's world lived inside these walls, and she rarely stepped into it. Tonight, she wanted Elijah to see where his father came from, without needing his father there to explain it. Sung-ho would meet them at 8. It was 7:40. She had wanted the extra 20 minutes to sit with her son and order him something ridiculous with gold leaf on it. The doors parted for them with a hush. Catherine stepped through, one hand light on Elijah's shoulder, and the warmth of the room folded around her. Low music, the clean smell of stone and citrus, a wall of candles behind the host stand. The man at the stand looked up. His badge caught the light first. R. Halden, gold letters on a gray suit cut close to a lean frame, blonde going silver at the temples, hair combed hard to one side, a millimeter of stubble kept exact. He smiled before he spoke, and the smile arrived a half-second before his eyes did. "Good evening," he said. "Do you have a reservation with us?" Walker, 7:45, party of 3. He looked down at his screen. His finger moved across it slowly. Once, twice. He tilted his head. "I'm not finding a Walker. It's under my name, Catherine Walker. That's what I searched." He kept his eyes on the screen a beat longer than the search required. Sometimes these come in under a different name. A husband, perhaps. Or the person who actually made the booking. "I made the booking." "Of course." He said it the way people say a word they don't believe. His finger tapped the screen twice more. Behind him, past the candles, Catherine could see the dining room, and she could see the tables. A window row along the glass, 4 of them, empty, the city spilling out gold beneath each one. A quiet corner booth, empty. The room was maybe half-seated. Elijah leaned into her side and whispered, "Is there a fish tank?" "Dad said there's a fish tank." "There's a fish tank," she told him, without looking down. A hostess drifted past behind him, young, Latina, dark hair in a low tail, a burgundy ribbon at her collar, and a silver badge that read, "Camila." She slowed a half-step when she saw the search still going, glanced at Catherine, then at the screen over Halden's shoulder, and Catherine watched the girl's mouth open, as if to help, and then close again. She had learned, wherever she'd learned it, that helping here was not free. She moved on with a tray of menus, and did not look back. Halden found it. She watched him find it. The small stillness, the flick of the eyes, the confirmation he'd had from the start. "Ah, Walker, party of 3, yes," he smiled again. "My apologies. It was hiding from me."
"It happens," Catherine said. "It does."
He reached for 2 menus, and a smaller one with a cartoon fish on the cover. He handed the child's menu to Elijah directly, over the stand, and for 1 second his gaze dropped to the boy, to the curls, the brown skin a shade lighter than his mother's, the dinosaur pin, and something passed behind the blue eyes and was gone. Right this way. He did not walk them toward the windows. He walked them the other direction, past the good tables, past the corner booth, toward the back of the room where the light thinned and a service corridor breathed cold air every time a waiter pushed through the doors. He stopped at a 2-top wedged against the wall by the kitchen pass. He'd have to pull a 3rd chair. He pulled a 3rd chair. "Here we are," he said. Catherine looked at the table. Then she looked at the window row, unmistakable, 4 tables deep in gold light, and nobody sitting at any of them. "Those are open," she said, and nodded toward the glass. "Those are held." "All 4? "We hold the window for a private event that may or may not confirm." He set the menus down on the small table, squaring them. "I'm sure you understand. We do get a certain clientele in the evenings, and there's an expectation of the room. This table is really quite lovely once you're settled." The table was against the wall by the swinging doors. It was not quite lovely. Catherine understood exactly what she was being told, and she understood that Halden knew she understood, and that this was the pleasure of it for him, that she would have to name it or swallow it, and either way he would have won the naming. Elijah had already climbed into the chair by the wall. He was reading the fish menu with his whole face. He didn't know yet. She wanted to keep it that way for as long as she could. She sat. "Wonderful," Halden said. "Your server will be right with you." He turned, then paused, half a pivot, as though a thought had only now caught him. "One small thing, Mrs. Walker. Miriam does have an expectation around conduct in the main room. We've had, in the past, some difficulty with, how do I put it, a certain energy, volume, movement." His eyes went to Elijah, just once, just long enough, for the comfort of the other guests. "I'm sure it won't be an issue with you." He's 8, Catherine said. I can see that. And he's read more than most of your guests. I don't doubt it. The smile held. It's simply our standard. I say it to everyone. He didn't say it to everyone. She had watched a family of 6 be seated at the window 20 seconds before she walked in, 3 children among them, one of them shrieking about the fish tank. She said nothing. She held his gaze until he was the one to break it. A courtesy, dressed as a nod, and then he was gone, back to his candles and his stand. Catherine's hand had found the chain at her throat without her deciding it should. A thin silver line, a small cross resting against her collarbone. Her mother's. She ran her thumb across it once. The old motion, the thing her hands did when a room turned on her. She caught herself doing it and lowered her hand to the table. Mom? Elijah had the menu flat now. They have a burger with gold on it. Actual gold. Can you eat gold? You can. Does it taste like anything? Like showing off. He laughed, delighted, and the sound of it was too loud for the back corner, and she saw 2 heads turn at a nearby table, and she felt her own spine straighten before she could stop it. The reflex of a woman who has spent her life being told her son's joy is a volume problem. Not too loud, okay, baby, she heard herself say, and hated the sentence the moment it left her, hated that Halden had put it in her mouth from 30 feet away. Elijah blinked. Was I loud? No, she reached across and straightened his dinosaur pin, which had gone crooked. You were exactly right. Order the gold burger. The hostess from the stand came instead of a server, as if she'd traded a station to do it. Camila. She poured the water without spilling a drop, and set Elijah's glass gently on the far edge of the table, away from his elbow, a small automatic kindness that told Catherine she'd waited tables through her own childhood somewhere. She recommended the short rib in a low voice. She told Elijah the fish tank was around the corner by the private dining room, and yes, he could look at it after his food, and Elijah beamed at her like she'd handed him a key to the building. Thank you, Catherine said, and meant more than the water. Camila's eyes flicked once toward the host stand, then back. The kid's portion of the short rib is better than the gold burger, she said quietly. Don't tell him I said that. And she was gone, before Catherine could ask her name, though she'd already read it off the badge and filed it, because she filed everything, because filing was the job, and the job did not switch off at dinner. When she left, Catherine leaned back and let herself look at the room properly. It was beautiful. She'd give it that. The candles multiplied in the black windows, so the whole city seemed to be burning politely. The other diners were mostly men in dark suits, mostly Korean, a few couples, the family at the window. Money moved through the space quietly, the way it does when it no longer has anything to prove, and she and her son had been placed at the seam of the room, by the door where the cold got in, close enough to the kitchen that she could hear a pan hit a burner. She thought about her husband's name on the tower outside. She thought about the fact that she could, right now, say 6 words and rearrange this entire room, watch Halden's face empty out, watch the window tables become suddenly, miraculously available. She thought about how good it would feel and how little it would teach anyone, least of all the man across the candles who had already decided who she was. She didn't say the 6 words, not because she was afraid, because Elijah was watching her, and she was still deciding what she wanted him to see a woman do. There was a version of tonight where she leaned across the stand and let Halden feel the floor tilt. She had done it before, in courtrooms, to men better armored than him. She knew the exact temperature of her own voice when she wanted a person to understand they had misjudged the size of the thing in front of them. It would take 1 sentence. The tower has my husband's name on it, and Halden would spend the rest of his night in a cold sweat, and Elijah would learn that the way you fix a room is to reach for the biggest name you're related to. She didn't want him to learn that. She wanted him to learn something she hadn't found the words for yet. Something about carrying yourself into a room that has decided against you, and refusing to shrink, and refusing, also, to burn it down to prove you could. She wasn't sure that lesson existed. She wasn't sure she believed in it herself, but she was going to try to hold the line long enough to find out, at least until 8 o'clock, when the choice would stop being hers. "Mom?" Elijah had lowered his voice now, careful, and that was the part that got into her chest. Why did that man look at my pin funny? He didn't. He did. He looked at it like it was dirty. Catherine held very still. The chain was in her fingers again. He was looking at a lot of things. Grown men do that. It doesn't mean the things are the problem. Is my pin okay? Your pin is the best thing in this whole room. She said it flat and certain, the way she said things in front of judges. Every single person in here wishes they had a dinosaur. He considered this. He decided to believe it, because he was 8, and she was his mother, and her voice did not shake. He went back to the menu. Catherine looked at the clock behind the host stand. 7:51. 9 minutes until Sung-ho walked through those doors, and this room reorganized itself around a truth it didn't yet know it was sitting inside. 9 minutes. She could give her son 9 good minutes. She ordered the gold burger. She ordered a glass of wine she didn't intend to finish. She asked Elijah which dinosaur he'd bring back to life, if he could bring back exactly one, knowing the answer would take the full 9 minutes and cost her nothing but attention, which was the one thing this room could not tax. He chose the Deinonychus, and he built the case the way he built all his cases, with his hands. It was smart, he explained, smarter than the movies said, and it hunted in a pack, and it had a claw on each foot the size of Catherine's finger, which he demonstrated by curving his own finger into a hook and hovering it over the bread plate like a threat. His voice climbed, as it always did when the facts got good. She let it climb. She watched his hands move and his eyes go bright, and she thought, this is the whole thing, this exact face, this is what I came here to protect, and no arrangement of candles and gold letters is worth 1 degree of it. For a few minutes, the back corner stopped being the back corner. It was just the two of them and a resurrected dinosaur, and the cold from the service doors couldn't reach the table. He was 3 sentences into why the pack would have outthought the asteroid when the water glass by his elbow caught the edge of his sleeve. He reached to steady it, too fast, the way children reach, and his hand knocked the dessert spoon off the lip of the table instead. It fell. It hit the marble floor at the mouth of the aisle, in the quiet between songs, and the sound it made was not the sound a spoon should make. It rang, bright, metallic, a single struck note that traveled the length of the polished room and reached every table at once, and for a half-second, the whole beautiful space seemed to hold its breath around one small boy and the silver thing at his feet. Elijah froze with his hand still out. And from the far side of the candles, unhurried, already smiling, Richard Halden began to walk toward their table. The spoon had stopped ringing. What replaced it was worse. The sound of a room deciding to watch. Halden crossed the floor without hurry. He stepped around the empty booth. He stepped around the 4 vacant tables by the glass. He came the long way, past all of it, so the walk itself said something. Catherine tracked him with her chin level and her hands in her lap. Elijah pulled his fingers back from the table's edge. He folded them into his sleeves. His eyes went to his mother, then to the manager, then to the small silver spoon lying face down on the marble. "I'll get that," Catherine said. She reached for it. Halden reached the table at the same moment and set his shoe beside the spoon, not on it, close enough that bending for it would mean bending toward him. She left it where it was and sat up. "Ma'am," He said the word like a period. We try to keep the floor clear. For the servers. It's a spoon. It's the floor. He smiled with the lower half of his face. You understand. Elijah's foot began to tap against the chair leg. Small, fast, the tap of a body that wanted to be somewhere else. Catherine put her hand flat on his knee under the table, and the tapping slowed. He dropped it, reaching for his water. She said, You put the glass on his weak side. I put the glass where the setting goes. Halden clasped his hands in front of the burgundy tie. The setting is standard. The problem isn't the setting. She heard the sentence build before he finished it. She had heard men build this exact sentence in deposition rooms, in courtrooms, across settlement tables, always the same architecture. Begin with the object, pivot to the person, land on the child. Say the problem then. He looked at Elijah. Only at Elijah. He looked at the boy the way he had looked at the pin an hour before, the little silver dinosaur, as if it were something that had gotten in without paying. The problem, Halden said, is movement. Noise. The room is quiet tonight. Our guests come up here for quiet. 2 tables away, the family of 6 laughed at something. One of the 3 children knocked a fork off the linen, and a server swept in and replaced it before it landed twice. Halden did not turn his head. Neither did Catherine. Her hand went to her collar, to the thin chain there, and her thumb found the small cross and pressed it once against the skin below her throat. She made herself let go of it. They just dropped a fork, she said. By the window. Different situation. How? He didn't answer that. He had no intention of answering that, and both of them knew it, and the not answering sat on the table between them like a third plate. Elijah spoke before she could stop him. I'm sorry, he said, up at the manager, in the clear, small voice of a boy who had been raised to apologize when adults were unhappy. I didn't mean to. Something in Catherine's chest folded closed. You didn't do anything, she told him, quiet, immediate. You hear me? Nothing. But Halden had already crouched. He brought himself down to the boy's height, one hand on his own knee, the gold badge on his chest, catching the candlelight. R. Halden. He put on the voice adults use for children they have decided are a problem. Warm on the surface, cold underneath, engineered to sound reasonable to anyone standing far enough away. Here's what we're going to do, champ. He never asked the boy's name. There's a lovely terrace right through those doors. Fresh air, best view in the city. How about you finish your dinner out there, where you've got room to move around? Sound good? Elijah's eyes came up to his mother. Not to the manager, to her. The whole question of what was happening ran through that one look. Is this a treat, or is this a punishment? And which face do I make? Catherine stood up. She stood the way she stood when a judge entered. One clean motion, spine first, and the burgundy blazer fell straight, and the room's attention shifted with her. Halden rose out of his crouch to meet her. He had a few inches. She did not seem to notice them. He'll finish his dinner at this table, she said, with me, where the reservation put us. Ma'am, I'd ask you to lower. I haven't raised it. She hadn't. That was the thing that made his jaw tighten. The volume never moved. You're going to want to be careful now, not because of who I am, because of what you're doing, and how many people are watching you do it. For 1 second, Halden's confidence flickered. His eyes did a small, involuntary sweep of the room, the family by the window, the couple near the bar, the busser frozen mid-step with a tray against his hip. Then the flicker closed over. He had done this before. He had a whole procedure for exactly this, and a woman standing up only meant he moved to the next line of it. I'm going to have to insist, he said, and the smile came back colder. House policy, disruptive guests, can be reseated at management's discretion. It's on the card by the door. You're welcome to read it. He's 8. And he threw silverware. He dropped a spoon. That's not what the room saw. The lie was so clean, so instantly assembled, that Catherine felt the old professional stillness come over her, the stillness that meant, this one has done this 100 times and has never once been made to pay for it. He wasn't improvising, he was reciting. Every phrase had a groove worn into it. Near the service doors, the hostess had stopped. Camila. She stood with the Bordeaux ribbon at her collar and a stack of menus against her chest, and her eyes were on Catherine, and her mouth opened a fraction. Catherine saw her decide to speak, saw her weigh it, saw her glance at Halden's back and feel the whole weight of a paycheck and a schedule and a reference land on her at once. Camila closed her mouth. She looked down at the menus, but she did not walk away, and Catherine filed that too. Mom? Elijah's voice had gone thin. He was still in his chair, both hands now gripping the seat under his thighs, the blue shirt bunched at the shoulders where he'd pulled himself small. It's okay. I can go outside. I don't mind. And there it was, the exact thing she'd been trying to prevent. The boy volunteering for his own removal, learning the lesson in real time, the lesson that said, when a man in a suit decides you're the problem, you make yourself smaller so it ends faster. She looked at her son. She looked at the terrace doors. Glass, smeared gold with the reflected candles, the city dropping away black and glittering behind them. She looked at Halden, who was already half turned toward those doors, one arm beginning to open in the direction he wanted them to go, certain of the outcome. A man who had never lost this particular argument because he'd built the argument so the other person always lost. She ran the whole thing forward in her head in the space of a breath. She could end him. She could say the name on the tower 40 floors below them, the name over the door, the name on the deed and the liquor license, and this man's own paycheck. She could say, my husband owns the chair you're standing on. And watch the color leave his face, and watch him fold, and watch him apologize with his whole body. Sung Ho would be here in minutes. The math was easy. The victory was already sitting there, wrapped, waiting for her to pick it up. And her son would learn a different lesson from that one. He would learn that the way you win is you turn out to be secretly powerful. That dignity comes from the name behind you. That the boy at the wrong table only mattered because his father owned the right ones. That wasn't the lesson. Elijah, she said. She crouched. She went down to his level, the way Halden had, except she took her son's face in both hands and turned it gently up to hers, so he was looking at her and nothing else. We're going to go out to the terrace, you and me, together. His forehead creased, but he said, I heard what he said. She kept her thumbs light against his cheeks. I'm choosing this. It's not him choosing it. Do you understand the difference? I'm the one deciding where we sit tonight, not him. She could feel Halden's satisfaction land somewhere above her shoulders, could feel him reading it as a win, and she let him have it because it wasn't his. He just didn't know that yet. Are we in trouble? Elijah whispered. No. Did I do it wrong? No, she smoothed the collar of his shirt where it had bunched. You did everything right. Grab your napkin, bring your fork. We're taking our dinner outside because the view is better and I want to look at the city with you. That's the whole reason. That's the only reason. He watched her face for the crack, the way children do, testing whether the calm was real or a thing put on for them. He didn't find the crack. She had spent 12 years in rooms where finding the crack cost people millions, and she did not have one for him to find. He nodded. He wiped his mouth carefully with the cloth napkin, folded it once the way she'd taught him, and picked up his fork in his fist. Catherine stood. She gathered Elijah's plate herself, the little rib, the potatoes he'd barely touched, because she was not going to hand it to a server, and she was not going to hand it to Halden. She lifted it with both hands. Then she took her own glass of water in her other hand, no third hand for her own plate, and left her own dinner sitting on the table untouched, because she'd carry his before she carried hers. "Wonderful," Halden said, stepping back to clear the path. Gracious now that he'd gotten his way, expansive, already rewriting the last 4 minutes into a story where he'd been accommodating. The terrace is really the best seat in the house. "You'll thank me." Catherine stopped in front of him, close, plate balanced in her hands, chain resting still against her collarbone, her son a half-step behind her hip. "Write down the time," she said. He blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The time, right now, write it down." Her voice stayed level and low, and it reached him and nobody else. "You're going to want to remember exactly when you did this, what you said, which family was by the window and which one you sent outside. Someday somebody's going to ask you to account for it, and you're going to wish you'd kept better notes." The smile held on his mouth, but it stopped reaching his eyes. "Is that a threat, ma'am?" "It's a courtesy." She stepped past him. "I don't threaten people. I keep records." She walked toward the glass doors with the plate in her 2 hands and her son at her side, and the room came apart into its pieces as she went. The family by the window gone quiet now, the mother watching over the rim of a wine glass, the busser looking at the floor, Camila by the service station with her jaw set and her eyes wet and bright, memorizing, and Catherine understood in that moment that she wasn't the only one in the room keeping records tonight. She was just the only one who'd said it out loud. Elijah pushed the door with his shoulder. It gave. Cold air came through the gap. Real air, city air, and the noise of the restaurant dropped away behind them as the door swung shut on its slow hinge. The terrace ran the width of the tower's crown. Stone underfoot, a waist-high glass barrier, and beyond it, the whole city laid out and burning in the dark. The grid of it, the rivers of headlights, the towers with their own lit crowns, all of it far below and far away. Wind moved across the open space and found the gaps in Elijah's collar, and he shivered and pretended he hadn't. There was one small table out here, folded, pushed against the wall, unset. Catherine looked at it. Then she looked at the low stone lip that ran along the base of the glass barrier, wide enough to hold a plate, at the exact right height for a boy of 8 to sit on the ground before it and eat. She didn't unfold the table. She set his plate on the stone ledge. She set his water beside it. She took off her burgundy blazer, the good silk, the armor of the whole evening, and she folded it once and laid it flat on the cold stone floor. "Sit," she said, and patted it. "Right here. I've got you." Elijah looked at the blazer on the ground. He knew what that jacket was. He'd watched her put it on in the mirror before they left, watched her check the line of it twice. "It'll get dirty," he said. "It's just a jacket." She lowered herself down beside the ledge, onto the bare stone, folding her knees under her, the ivory silk of her blouse against the gray floor, and she held out her arm. "Come on. Best view in the city." He wasn't lying about that part. Her son crossed the terrace and sat down on his mother's folded blazer, in front of the low stone ledge, with the entire lit city spread out and glittering in front of him, and his small plate balanced on the cold stone at the height of his hands. He picked up his fork. Catherine knelt beside him on the bare ground. She wrapped one arm around his shoulders and drew him in against her side, and she felt how cold he'd gotten already, and she rubbed his arm once, twice, to bring the warmth back. Behind the glass, the dining room glowed. She could see it from here. The candles, the white cloths, the family by the window still eating, Halden moving between the tables with his hands folded behind his back, surveying the room he'd just cleared. He glanced once toward the terrace doors. He couldn't see them well through the reflected candlelight, or maybe he didn't try. He turned back to his floor. Catherine watched him for a moment through the glass. She catalogued it. The way he walked, the way he stopped at the window table and said something, and the mother there laughed, and he laughed too. Warm with them, warm with the ones he'd decided belonged. Then she stopped watching him, because her son needed the arm around him more than the manager deserved her attention, and she turned her whole body toward Elijah and put the city and the glass and the man behind her back. "You warm enough?" she asked. "Yeah." He wasn't. She pulled him tighter anyway, and he let her, leaning into her shoulder, and for a second he was just a small boy eating dinner with his mother, and the where of it didn't matter to him at all. She wished it could stay that simple. She could feel that it wasn't going to. 40 floors of glass and steel and marble under them, a dining room behind them where her own untouched dinner was going cold, at a good table under warm light, and out here, on the stone, in the wind, her son ate his supper off a ledge with his mother kneeling on the ground at his side. Elijah chewed. He swallowed. He looked out at the enormous burning city, and then he looked down at his plate, and then he looked up at her with the small crease back between his eyebrows, the one she'd been trying all night to keep from forming. She felt the question coming before he opened his mouth. She felt it the way you feel weather change. Every muscle in her went still around him, waiting for it, already knowing there was no motion she could make, and no name she could drop that would take this next part away from him. The wind moved. Elijah set down his fork on the cold stone ledge. "Mom," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course you can," Catherine said. "You can always ask me anything." Elijah kept his eyes on the city. 40 floors of light spread out under the glass barrier, and he looked at all of it before he looked at her. His hands stayed in his lap. He had folded them the way he folded them in church, one over the other, and that told her the question had weight before he said a word. "Did I do something wrong?" The wind pushed a strand of hair across her face. She left it there. "No," she said, "you didn't." "Then why are we out here?" She had prepared for the first question. She had not prepared for the second one to arrive so fast, or for it to land in that flat, reasonable tone, the tone of a boy trying to solve a problem instead of cry about it. That was worse. Crying she could hold. This she had to answer. "Because I chose it," she said. "I told you that inside." "I know." He picked at the edge of the folded jacket he was sitting on. "But you chose it because of him." She reached for the cross at her throat before she knew she was doing it. Her thumb found the small silver bar of it and pressed. Then she made herself let go because he watched her hands the way she watched everyone else's, and she did not want him learning that her hands told the truth her mouth was managing. "Look at me," she said. He turned. In the light coming up off the city, his face was half gold and half shadow, the dimple in his left cheek a small dark line, because he was not smiling. 8 years old. She could still see the baby in the roundness under his eyes, and she could see, sitting right beside it, the man he would become, and both of them were waiting for her to lie or not lie. "The man inside made a choice too," she said. "He chose to be unkind. That's his. It belongs to him. It is not yours, and it is not about you." But he looked at my pin. He did, like it was dirty. "Yes." Elijah looked down at the dinosaur pinned to his lapel. He had polished it that afternoon. She knew because he'd asked her for the little cloth from her glasses case, and she had watched him breathe on the silver and rub it in circles until it caught the lobby light. He touched it now, once, checking it was still there. "It's not dirty," he said, not to her, to himself, or to the man through the glass, or to no one. "No," she said, "it's the best thing in this whole building." He almost smiled. Then the question underneath the question came up. the one she'd felt moving toward the surface since he set his fork down, and his voice dropped so low the wind nearly took it. "Is something wrong with me?" There it was. She had argued in front of judges who wanted her to fail. She had stood in a mahogany room and taken apart a man 3 times her wealth while he called her young lady, and smiled at the jury like she was a girl who had wandered in from the wrong floor. She had felt her own pulse in her ears and let none of it reach her voice. She knew how to keep a face. She could not keep this one. Something moved through her chest, fast, and she turned her head a half-inch toward the glass barrier and the drop beyond it, so that when it reached her eyes, he would not catch the exact moment. One breath, she spent it. Then she came back. "No," she said. "Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing." "You said it too fast." God, he was hers all the way down. "I said it fast because it's the truest thing I know," she said. "I don't have to think about it. If you asked me what 2 plus 2 is, I wouldn't stop to count. You understand? Some things I have to work out. This one I don't." He studied her. He was checking, the way he'd checked inside, running his eyes over her face for the crack. She held still and let him look, because a lie would show and the truth would hold, and she had decided a long time ago which one she was going to hand her son. "Then why does it keep happening?" he said. She went very still. "What keeps happening, baby?" He shrugged one shoulder. It was a small movement, and it cost him a lot. "In the park, the lady moved her bag when I sat down. At Marcus's building, the man asked me who I was here to see. My teacher calls on Bradley when he's wrong, but she says I need to be sure before I put my hand up. He said it the way he listed dinosaurs, one fact after another, no drama, because the drama would have made it a story, and this was not a story to him. This was the weather. It's not one time, you keep saying it's not about me, but I'm the one who's always there." The city hummed under them. Somewhere below, a siren rose and thinned and disappeared into the grid. She did not answer right away. She had a courtroom answer ready, clean and shaped, and she felt it sitting in her mouth, and she did not use it, because he had just told her something true, and a shaped answer would teach him that when he was brave enough to name it, the adults handed back polish. She put the courtroom down. "Come here," she said, and she opened her arm. He shifted along the folded jacket until his side was against hers. She felt how cold he'd gotten. His shoulder was chilled through the thin blue shirt, and she brought her arm all the way around him and rubbed his upper arm hard, twice, 3 times, warming it, buying herself the seconds. "You're right," she said. His head came up. Of everything she could have said, that was the one he hadn't braced for. "You are always there," she said. "That part is real. I'm not going to tell you it isn't, because you've got 2 good eyes, and you've been using them. So here's the truth, and it's harder than the other thing I could say. Ready?" He nodded against her. "Some grown people carry a broken thing," she said. "They look at a person, and before that person does one single thing, the broken part tells them a story about who they're looking at. It's fast. It's older than them. Somebody handed it to them, and they never put it down." She kept her voice level, the rhythm even, because the words were heavy, and the voice had to carry them without shaking. "When that man looked at your pin, he wasn't seeing your pin. He was seeing his own broken thing, and he put it on you, because you were standing where it could reach. That's not you being wrong, Elijah. That's you being close enough to touch." He was quiet. His fingers had found the hem of her ivory blouse, and he was rolling the silk between them, the way he used to at 4 when he was falling asleep. "So it's like a cold," he said slowly. He caught it from somebody. "Something like a cold, yes." She turned that over, then decided he could hold the whole shape of it. "Except a cold, you want to get better. This thing, some people like carrying. It makes them feel tall, so they feed it. They keep it warm the way you kept your pin polished. She watched that reach him. That's the part that isn't a cold. That's the part that's a choice. And a choice can be answered. He frowned at the ledge. Answered how? By people who don't carry it, she said. By people who write down the time. By people who don't look away when it happens to somebody who isn't them. She heard herself and knew she was talking to more than an 8-year-old, and pulled it back down to his size. By you, someday, when a man moves his bag off a seat and you decide not to make yourself smaller so he feels better, you don't owe that eye your shape. It's not fair, he said. No. You're supposed to say it gets fair. When? She said. When you're older? I'd be lying. I don't lie to you. She tightened her arm. It doesn't get fair on its own. It gets fair when somebody makes it. That's a different sentence. You hear the difference. Through the glass, past his head, she could see the dining room. Warm light. Her own table sat where she'd left it, her plate untouched under the low lamp, the cloth napkin still folded into its shape, a full glass of water throwing a small bright coin of reflection onto the linen. Somebody's dinner, arranged and lit and waiting, worth a window and a candle. And here, on the crown of the tower, on cold stone, her son ate off a ledge with the whole city for a table and the wind for a waiter. She looked at the two things at once, the crystal inside and the plate on the parapet, and she filed it. Not for tonight, for later. For the record, she had already told a man to start keeping. Mom, Elijah tugged the silk. You went somewhere. I'm right here. She looked down at him. Eat. Your food's getting cold, and I'm not letting that man win twice in one night. That got the smile. Small, quick, gone, but real, the dimple deepening for a second in his left cheek. He picked the fork back up off the ledge and speared a piece of the rib and ate it, and she watched him chew and felt something in her own throat come loose enough to let air through. He ate 3 more bites before he spoke again. Are you sad? A little. Because of me? No, she said it flat and fast, the 2+2 voice. Never once because of you. Get that all the way in. I am sad because you are the best thing I have ever made, and a man in a gray suit looked at you and saw a problem, and that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard, and it made me want to do something I'd have to apologize to God for. She touched the cross. That's why I'm out here on this cold floor instead of in there. Because sitting in there being polite while he sorted us would have cost me more than my knees. Elijah looked at her knees. She was still kneeling on the bare stone, had been the whole time, and only now did she register the ache of it, the cold that had come up through the fabric and into the bone. Your knees must hurt, he said. They do. You could sit on the jacket. That's yours. We can share it. She almost broke, then, right there. He said it so simply, we can share it, the whole of him in 4 words, offering back the exact thing she'd given him. She swallowed hard and shifted, and sat, hip to the stone, and pulled him half onto her lap, and the folded burgundy silk took some of both of them, and it was not enough room, and neither of them said so. Okay? She said. Okay. They sat. The plate steamed thinly on the ledge. Below them, the city did what cities do at night, indifferent and beautiful. 10,000 windows, and behind each one, a person nobody out here would ever sort or spare. I want to tell you something, Catherine said, and I want you to keep it, even when I'm not around, to say it again. He tipped his head back to see her face. There is nothing wrong with you, she said each word on its own. Not your skin, not your hair, not your pin, not your name. Your name has 2 halves, and both of them are strong. Walker walked out of places that tried to bury it. The other half runs a building this tall. She felt him go still at that, felt the question start to form, and she moved past it before it could land. because tonight was not the night for that particular door. "There is nothing wrong with you," she said again. "There is something wrong with the eye that looks at you wrong. You spend your life fixing yourself for that eye. You'll be busy till you die, and you'll never be finished, because the eye was never really looking at you. You hear me? I hear you." "Say it back. Not all of it. The first part." He took a breath. The wind moved his hair. "There's nothing wrong with me." Again. "There's nothing wrong with me." Steadier. One more. "Like you believe it." He sat up off her lap, straightened his spine the way he'd seen her straighten hers 100 times, put his shoulders where she put hers, and looked not at her, but out at the whole lit city like he was telling it, not her. "There is nothing wrong with me." "Good," she said, and her voice finally cracked on the one syllable, just once, and she let it, because he needed to know a true thing could be strong enough to shake the person saying it. "That's the one. That's the sentence. You lose everything else I ever tell you. You keep that one." He nodded. Then, because he was 8, he picked up the fork again and went back to the rib like the whole conversation had been an ordinary thing, and in a way, she hoped it had felt that way to him. Ordinary, survivable, a thing his mother met head-on without flinching or lying. That was the whole point. Not to keep the cold away from him. She couldn't. To stand in it with him. So he learned that the cold was survivable, and that he was never in it alone. She rubbed his back in a slow circle while he ate. Through the glass, the maitre d' with the gold nameplate crossed the dining room again, unhurried, hands loose at his sides, pausing at the window family to say something that made the mother laugh. He was warm to them. He had decided they belonged. Catherine watched him be warm and did not let it move her face, and she thought, without heat now, coldly, in the part of her that read documents at 2 in the morning, "I am going to remember every second of this." She turned her back to the glass again and gave the last of her attention to her son. "Tell me about the Deinonychus," she said. "The claw thing. You started in the car and I cut you off." His whole face changed. The sickle claw. The sickle claw. On the second toe. It could pull it up so it didn't touch the ground when it ran, so it stayed sharp. He was up on his knees now, both hands going, the cold forgotten, the pin catching the light with every gesture. They hunted in packs. That's the new thing they think. Not alone, together. So even the small ones could take down something way bigger than them, if there were enough. "Enough of them together," she said. "Yeah, I like that," she said, and meant it in more than one way, and kept the more to herself. "Keep going, I'm listening to all of it." And he did, the words tumbling now, and she held the plate steady on the ledge with 2 fingers so the wind couldn't take it, and she kept her back to the warm, bright room where a table for one sat lit and waiting, and worth so much less than the cold stone she was sitting on, and for a few minutes, the terrace was not a punishment. It was the best table in the house. She had made it that, out of a folded jacket and a straight answer and her own 2 knees on the ground, and no man in a gray suit could reach it. Below them, 40 floors down and climbing, an elevator she couldn't see began its rise toward the top of the tower. The elevator doors opened on the top of the tower, and Sung-ho stepped out with his phone already in his hand, thumb halfway through a message he would never finish sending. He was 6 minutes late. A meeting had run long, a signature had been chased down a hallway, and he had spent the ride up composing the apology he owed his wife for it. Party of 3. Catherine's name on the book. He had told her he would beat her there, and he had not. The host stand was empty. He stopped at it out of habit, then he looked past it, into the room he had walked into 1,000 times, and something in the shape of the room was wrong. He could not name it in the first second. The tables were where they always were. The light was the warm, low gold he had chosen himself, 3 years ago, arguing with a designer about bulbs. The window line glowed. A family of 6 sat along it, 3 children, a grandmother laughing at something. His wife's coat was not on the rack by the door. He knew that coat. He had bought her that coat, and it was not where a coat went when a woman sat down to dinner in a room that welcomed her. He put the phone in his pocket. Halden came out of the far aisle with a wine list folded against his palm, moving toward a couple at table 9, and Sung-ho watched the manager cross the floor the way a man watches a stranger walk through his own house. Halden had the walk of someone who owned the ground. Chin level, unhurried. A little too warm at one table, passing 3 others without a glance. Sung-ho did not go to him. He went the other way, along the wall, toward the service doors, because that was the only part of the room he could not see from the entrance, and his wife was nowhere in the part he could. He found the 2 top pushed against the wall by the kitchen doors first. A single plate sat on it, untouched. A folded napkin, a full glass of water throwing the gold light back at him. A 3rd chair had been dragged over and left at an angle, the way a chair sits when the person who needed it stood up and did not come back. His son's chair. He knew the plate was Catherine's, the way you know your own name, read aloud in a crowd. She had ordered, she had been seated, and she had gotten up and walked away from a plate she had not touched, in his restaurant, at a table shoved against the wall 6 feet from the doors the busboys used. Sung-ho stood very still over that plate for the length of one breath. Then he lifted his eyes, past the plate, past the aisle, to the wall of glass on the far side of the room that opened onto the terrace, and he saw them. The city was behind the glass, 40 floors of lit windows falling away into the dark, and against it, low, at the level of a man's knee, his son sat on the stone. Elijah, on the ground, on something folded and dark that Sung-ho's mind refused for 1 second to recognize as his wife's jacket. Catherine was beside the boy, on the stone with him, her ivory blouse bright against the gray, her back straight the way it went straight when she was holding something together with the muscles of her own spine. They were eating on the floor of his terrace. His son was eating on the floor of his terrace, while a family of 6 laughed at the warm window, and a plate his wife had never touched sat cooling by the kitchen door. Something moved through Sung-ho that had no sound. It did not go to his face. His face was the thing his family called the quiet one, the thing that had made men across 3 tables of negotiation sweat, while he said nothing at all. It went to his hands, which opened, and then closed, and then opened again at his sides. He crossed the room to the glass. Through it, he watched his wife hold their son's plate steady against the wind with 2 fingers. He watched Elijah say something, and Catherine tip her head to hear it, and the boy's shoulders come up in that quick way they came up when he was being brave about a thing he should never have had to be brave about at all. Sung-ho put his hand flat on the glass door. Catherine felt the change in the light before she heard the door, a shape between her and the room. She turned, and her husband was standing in the open doorway of the terrace, with his hand still on the frame, and she watched him take in the plate on the ledge, and the jacket under their son, and her 2 knees, in one slow sweep that ended on her face. "Appa," Elijah said. He was up before the word finished, off the folded jacket, running the 4 steps to his father, and Sung-ho went down on one knee to catch him, without any care at all, for the crease of a suit that cost more than the busboy made in a season. He caught the boy against his chest and put one hand flat on the back of his son's head, and over the small shoulder his eyes found his wife's, and he asked her the whole question without a single word in it. Catherine got up off the stone. Her knees had gone stiff, and she let them be stiff. She smoothed nothing. She met her husband's eyes and gave him the answer the same way, a small shake of the head that meant not here, not in front of him, and a smaller tilt toward the boy that meant and not in front of this one. You're cold, Sing-ho said, into his son's hair. It was not what he wanted to say. It was what was safe to say. The city's really far down, Elijah told him. Mom says 40 floors. 41, Sung-ho said. She rounds. The boy laughed, surprised, and the laugh was the thing that decided it. Sung-ho looked at the plate on the ledge. He looked at the folded table against the wall that no one had opened. He looked at his wife's jacket lying on the stone, and then, with his son still under his arm, he did the thing that no one who worked in that building had ever seen him do. He took off his jacket. He shrugged out of it, one arm at a time, and he did not hand it to anyone because there was no one there to hand it to, and he laid it on the stone beside Catherine's, dark wool on dark wool, and he reached up and pulled the knot of his tie loose from his collar with 2 fingers. "Appa, your suit," Elijah said. "It's just a suit," said Sung-ho, and he did not see his wife's breath catch at the words, at how close they were to the words she had used on this same stone an hour before. But Catherine heard it, and she pressed her lips together and looked at the city so her face would hold. He sat down on the floor of his own terrace. He sat on the cold stone with his back to the low glass barrier and the whole lit city behind him, and he patted the jacket beside him, and Elijah dropped down into the crook of his arm. Sung-ho reached over and took the plate off the ledge and set it on his own knee where the boy could reach it easier, and he picked up the fork and he held it out. "Show me," he said. "Which one's the good one?" "The rib," Elijah said, taking the fork. "Not the potatoes. The potatoes are cold. Then we send the potatoes back. You can do that?" "I own the potatoes," Sung-ho said, and the boy laughed again, and did not hear the thing under it, and Catherine lowered herself back down onto the stone on her son's other side, so the 3 of them made a line against the glass, and for one breath, the terrace was only a family sitting on the floor of the tallest room in the city, eating a cold rib in the wind. It lasted exactly that long. The terrace door opened again. "Sir," Halden's voice arrived before the rest of him, pitched to carry, the voice of a man who has spotted a problem and intends to be seen solving it. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to." He came out onto the stone 2 steps and stopped. He took in the man on the ground, a guest, plainly, and a well-dressed one, sitting on the floor of the terrace in his shirt sleeves, with the woman and the boy Halden had put out here 40 minutes ago. Some relative, arrived late, some uncle who thought the rules bent for him. The whole shape of the evening was slipping sideways in a direction Halden did not like, and Halden's instinct when a thing slipped was to plant his foot on it. "Sir, this terrace isn't open seating," Halden said. "I'm going to need you to come inside, all of you. We can discuss the table situation like adults, but I can't have guests sitting on the ground. It's a liability." Sung-ho did not turn around. He set the fork down on the plate. He said something quiet to Elijah, and the boy went still against his side. Then Sung-ho put one hand on the stone and rose, unfolding to his full height with his back still to the manager, and only when he was standing did he turn. Halden's kracha caught the light. "R. Halden, in gold." "You put my son on the floor," Sung-ho said. His voice was not loud. It was the flattest thing in the room. Catherine, who had heard that voice, used on men who owned banks, felt the hair on her arms lift. Halden's mouth moved into the shape of the smile he used on complaints. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but there was an incident earlier with the child and There was no incident with the child. With respect, I was here and you weren't. I own this building." The words did not echo, they did not need to. They dropped into the middle of the terrace and sat there, and Catherine watched them land on Halden one at a time, watched the gears behind the blue eyes turn and slip and fail to catch. "I'm sorry," Halden said. "Yoon Sung-ho." He said his own name, the way you set down a weight you have carried a long way. Hanul Group, the tower has my name on the deed, and the restaurant has my name on the license, and the woman you seated by the kitchen doors is my wife. He let the collar of his open shirt sit where it sat, the loosened tie hanging, and he did not raise a hand or a voice. The boy you put out in the wind is my son. Halden's face went through 3 colors in 2 seconds. Catherine saw the exact moment the man understood. It was not fear first. First it was calculation, the frantic rewind of the last 40 minutes, the mesa, the terrace, the warning about volume and movement, every word replaying now in a room where the ground had just moved under his feet. And behind the calculation, catching up fast, came the fear, white and total, the fear of a man who has just seen the floor of his own life open. "Mr. Yoon," Halden said. The wine list was still folded in his hand, and he did not seem to know it was there. "Mr. Yoon, there's been a misunderstanding. If I had known." "If you had known who she was," Sung-ho said. "Sir, that's the sentence you were about to finish." Sung-ho took 1 step, and the step was worse than a shout. "If you had known who she was, you would have given her the window. That's what you were about to say to me." Halden's mouth stayed open. Nothing came out of it. Behind them, through the glass, Catherine could see the room beginning to turn. The couple at table 9 had stopped talking. A server stood frozen at the pass, with 2 plates going cold in his hands. And near the service doors, in her black dress with the burgundy collar ribbon, Camila had come to the edge of the glass and was watching the terrace with both hands pressed flat against the front of her uniform. "Appa," Elijah's voice, small, from the floor. He was still sitting on the jacket, the plate abandoned, looking up at his father, and the manager, with the particular alertness of a child who has just understood that the grown-ups are no longer pretending. Sung-ho heard it. Catherine watched him hear it. She watched the flat thing in her husband's face flicker, just once, as the sound of his son's voice pulled at him from the ground. He did not look down at the boy. He kept his eyes on Halden, because looking away from Halden now would have been a mercy, and he had none to spare. But his voice, when it came again, had dropped lower, pitched to keep the worst of it away from the child on the floor. "You are going to walk back inside," Sung-ho said, "and you are going to stand at that host stand, and you are not going to touch a single guest in this room until I come in. Do you understand me?" "Yes." Halden's voice cracked on the one word. "Yes, Mr. Yoon. Say it quietly. My son is listening to you." "Yes, sir," a whisper. Halden backed toward the door. He turned too fast, caught his shoulder on the frame, and the folded wine list slipped out of his hand and fell open on the stone, and he left it there, and went inside, and the room swallowed him. For a moment, no one on the terrace moved. Then Elijah, on the ground, in the wind, with the whole lit city at his back, and his father's loosened tie hanging, and his mother's jacket under him, looked up at both his parents and asked the only question that mattered to an 8-year-old on the floor of the tallest room in the world. "So can we eat inside now?" Catherine did not laugh. She wanted to, and she could not, because her throat had closed around the thing that had been building since the color fell in the marble an hour ago, and she looked at her husband over their son's head, and she saw that his face had not come back yet. He was still standing where Halden had left him. His hands were still open at his sides. He was looking through the glass at the warm gold room with the empty host stand, and the family laughing at the window, and the plate his wife had never touched, and Catherine knew that look, and it was not finished. "Sung-ho," she said. He turned to her. "He's asking you a question," she said, and tilted her head down at their son, and it was the same thing she had done to him with the small shake of the head an hour of glass ago. Not here, not in front of this one. Sung-ho crouched. He came down to Elijah's level on the stone, and he put his hand on the back of the boy's neck, warm, and he said, "Yeah, we're going to eat inside. We're going to eat wherever you want. The window? If you want the window, you get the window." Elijah thought about it with the whole seriousness of his 8 years, the one where the grandma's laughing looks good. "Then that's ours," Sung-ho said. He stood, and he lifted his jacket off the stone, and he did not put it back on. He handed it to Catherine instead, and bent and picked up hers, the burgundy silk gone cold and creased from the ground, and he held it while she slid her arms in, his hands settling it onto her shoulders from behind, and for 1 second his palms stayed there, pressing down, saying the thing he could not say in front of the boy. She reached up and covered one of his hands with hers. Then she felt it change under her fingers, felt her husband's hand go from the softness of that 1 second back to something set, something decided, and she knew, the way she had known the plate was hers, that whatever he was about to do inside that room, she was not going to be able to stop it by holding his hand. He picked up his son's plate off the stone. He did it himself, the way she had carried it out herself an hour ago, and the mirror of the gesture was not lost on her, and it frightened her more than shouting would have. He carried the plate, and he took Elijah's hand in his free one, and he walked toward the glass door, and Catherine walked beside them, and the 3 of them crossed back into the warm gold room, where every face had turned to watch, and where Richard Halden stood at the host stand, with both hands gripping the edge of it, and the blood gone out of his lips, waiting. Sung-ho set the boy's plate on the nearest empty table before he did anything else. He set it down flat, both hands, the way a man sets down something he doesn't want to spill. Then he let go of Elijah's hand. He crouched to the boy's height, and he kept his voice level. "Stay with your mother. Count the windows. Tell me how many when I come back." Elijah looked at him. "Why?" "Because I asked." The boy went to Catherine's side and pressed against her hip, his eyes moving along the glass. 1, 2, 3, the way children do a thing they've been given to hold on to. Catherine put her hand flat on his back and felt her own pulse in her palm. She knew what the level voice meant. She had heard it once before, years ago, over a phone. The voice had been flat then too. Sung-ho straightened and crossed the room to the host stand. Richard Halden was still gripping the edge of it. Up close, the color had not come back to his lips. He had arranged his face into the shape of usefulness, the shape a man makes when he has decided the disaster can still be managed. He started talking before Sung-ho reached him. "Sir, I want to say, personally, how much I regret the confusion tonight. If I had understood the situation, the reservation, your family, you would have given her the window. Yes, absolutely, the window, the private room, anything. That's the part." Halden blinked. "Sir, you just told me the truth." Sung-ho's hands hung loose at his sides. "You'd have done it for the window, for the name, not for her." The salon had gone quiet in the way rooms go quiet when everyone has decided to pretend they aren't listening. The couple at table 9 had turned in their chairs. A server stood frozen at the pass, with a tray going cold on his arm. Camila had come to the edge of the host station, both hands pressed together in front of her mouth, and she was watching Sung-ho's shoulders the way you watch a wire before it snaps. Halden tried again. He reached for the register of 2 managers solving a problem. "I think if we could speak somewhere private, we could." My son ate on the floor. There was an incident with... There was no incident. Sung-ho did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. That was the thing people said about him, the quiet one, and it had always meant something colder than shouting. You made one up about an 8-year-old to a room full of people who work for me. "Mr. Yoon," he said, "sorry to you." Something moved under the flat surface then, just for a second, like a fish under ice. He looked up at you, and he said he was sorry for dropping a spoon. Catherine saw it happen before it happened. She saw Sung-ho's weight shift onto the front of his feet. She saw his right hand come up off his thigh. She had 1 second, and she spent it saying his name. Once, low, Sung-ho. But the word landed a half beat behind him, and by the time it reached him, his hand was already moving. The slap came open-palmed, and it came hard, across the side of Halden's face, and the sound of it cracked through the quiet room, the same way the spoon had cracked an hour before, except louder, except final. Halden's head snapped sideways. His hip caught the corner of the host stand. A stack of leather menus went off the edge and slapped the marble. He put one hand up to his cheek and the other to the stand to keep himself up, and for a moment, nobody in the room breathed. Catherine crossed the space between them fast and got both hands on Sung-ho's arm. Not to shield Halden. She would think about that later, that her body had not moved to protect the man who put her son outside. Her hands closed on her husband's forearm, and she pulled it down, in, against his own chest, and she stepped between him and the host stand, so that her back was to Halden, and her face was 6 inches from Sung-ho's face. "Look at me," she said. "Not him, me." His arm was rigid under her hands. His jaw worked once. His eyes came off Halden and found hers. "Elijah is counting windows," she said, quiet, only for him. "He's watching your back right now. Whatever you do next, that's the thing he keeps." The rigidity did not leave his arm all at once. It left in stages, the way a fist unclenches finger by finger. He breathed out through his nose. Behind her, she heard Halden make a small wet sound, half a word, and she felt Sung-ho's arm tighten again at the sound of it, and she pressed harder. "You already made your point," she said. "Don't give him yours back." Halden, stupidly, kept talking. His voice had gone up and thin. "You hit me. In front of. You assaulted me. There are witnesses. There are cameras in this room. Mr. Yoon, there are cameras." "Yes," Sung-ho said. He stepped back from Catherine's hands, gently, and he looked at the small dome of black glass in the ceiling above the host stand. "There are." He took his phone out of his vest pocket. Catherine felt her stomach drop before she understood why. She reached for his wrist again. "What are you doing?" "The right thing." He unlocked the screen with his thumb. For once, the whole way through. Sung-ho. "I put my hand on a man." He said it plainly, to her, like a fact he was reading off a page. "In my building, in front of my staff and my son. I'm not going to stand here and have my lawyers turn it into nothing. That's what he does." He tipped his head a 1/4 inch toward Halden without looking at him. "Turns things into nothing. Makes the record say what he needs. I'm not going to be that." "You don't call the police on yourself," Catherine said. Her voice had a crack in it she did not authorize. "You don't. We handle this. I handle this. It's what I do. Let me. If I make it disappear because I own the building," he said, "then everything you did out there tonight was for nothing. You wouldn't say the name. You knelt on stone so he wouldn't learn the wrong thing." His thumb moved over the screen. "I'm his father. I don't get to teach him the other one." He put the phone to his ear. The room had stopped pretending not to listen. Camila had both hands over her mouth now for real. The couple at table 9 had risen halfway out of their seats. Somewhere near the kitchen, a plate was set down too hard. "Yes," Sung-ho said into the phone. His voice was steady and awful in its steadiness. He gave the address, the tower, the floor. "I need to report an assault. I'm the one who committed it. I struck a man. Open hand. 1 blow. He's on his feet. He's not seriously hurt. My name is Yoon Sung-ho." A pause. "Yes. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." He lowered the phone and ended the call and slid it back into his vest, and then he did the thing that undid Catherine completely. He turned to the room, to all of it, the servers and the couple and the family at the window who had gone silent with their forks down, and he said, in the voice you would use to give a table their check, "It'll be a few minutes. Please, finish your dinners. The kitchen is still open." Nobody moved. Nobody touched a fork. Catherine turned around. Across the room, Elijah was standing exactly where she had left him, small in his blue shirt and his suspenders, the dinosaur pin catching the light on his lapel. He was not counting windows anymore. He was looking at his father, and his mouth was slightly open, and she understood from 30 feet away that he had seen all of it. The hand coming up, the crack, the phone. She went to him. She went fast, and she got down on one knee in front of him and put herself in his sight line, so he had to look at her instead of past her. Hey, eyes here. Appa hit the man. It was not an accusation. It was a boy trying to fit a new shape into a place where it did not go. You said we don't. You said even when they're mean, we don't. You said keep records. I did say that. She would not lie to him. She had spent the whole night not lying to him, and she was not going to start now with the hardest one. I meant it. It's still true. But Appa did a thing he shouldn't have done, and he knows it. That's why he called. She held his face the way she'd held it on the terrace. The strong part isn't the hit, baby. Anybody can hit. The strong part is calling the police on yourself after. Do you understand the difference? The hitting was the weak second. The calling is the whole man. Elijah's chin was going. Are they going to take him? She didn't answer fast this time. She had told him earlier that she said things too fast when she wanted them to be true, and he would catch her at it, so she waited a breath and gave him the real one. Yes, for a while. Not forever. I'm going to make sure it's not forever. She wiped his cheek with her thumb before the tear finished falling. That's my job. That's the thing I'm actually good at. Better than anything. And I'm going to do it for him. The elevator chimed. 2 uniformed officers came out first, unhurried, reading the room. Behind them came a woman in a gray overcoat over a black blazer, badge clipped at her hip, hair cut straight at the jaw. She took in the whole floor in one slow pass, the menus on the marble, Halden with his hand to his face, the frozen servers, the boy against his mother's chest, and last, the man standing very still by the host stand. Something crossed the detective's face when she saw him. Catherine caught it. Recognition, and under it, something that cost her. "Sung-ho," the woman said. "Mina. Tell me it's not what dispatch said." "It's exactly what dispatch said." He held out his own wrists, together, in front of him, an offering. "I called it in. You don't have to make it a thing. I struck him. There's video." Mina Kwan didn't take his wrists. She walked past him to Halden, looked at the red spreading over the cheekbone, and asked quietly if he needed medical. Halden started to say a great many words, and she held up one hand, and he stopped. Then she came back to Sung-ho. She stood in front of him, and for a second, she was not a detective. She was a person who had known this man a long time, and Catherine watched her decide, watched her put the person away in a drawer and close it. "You know I have to. I'd think less of you if you didn't. Don't do that." Something tightened around her eyes. "Don't make it easy so I feel better. Turn around." He turned around. She took the cuffs off her belt, and she was gentle about it, but she did it all the way, both wrists, the ratchet clicking twice, and she recited the words every person in that room had heard 100 times on television and never once for real, about the right to remain silent, about an attorney, and the flatness of the words in the gold room with the city burning 40 floors down was the worst sound Catherine had heard all night. Worse than the slap. worse than the spoon. And Elijah made a small broken hiccup of a noise into her collarbone, and she turned him around so his back was to it. But he twisted in her arms. He was 8, and he was strong, and he twisted to see, because children always need to see the thing you are trying to save them from. Appa! Seung-ho turned his head. Over his own shoulder, cuffed, he found his son, and he did not look ashamed, and he did not look afraid. He made his face into something calm on purpose, the way Catherine had made hers calm on the terrace. And he said, "How many windows?" Elijah's whole body was shaking. "What? The windows? I asked you to count. How many?" The boy's mouth opened and closed. He looked wildly at the glass wall, the city, the panes. 14. There's 14. 14. Seung-ho nodded slowly, like this was the most important information he had received all year. Good man. That's my good man. You hold that number for me. I'll ask you when I'm back. When are you back? Soon. And there it was, the fast word, the one Catherine had warned Elijah about, and she saw Seung-ho spend it knowing exactly what it cost, and choosing to spend it anyway, because sometimes a father has to hand his son a soft lie to walk out on. Soon. Listen to your mother. She's the smartest person in any room, including this one. Mina's hand was on his arm. She turned him toward the elevator. The officers moved in around him. At the last moment, Seung-ho stopped, and he looked back, not at Elijah this time, but at Catherine, and everything he could not say in front of the boy went across the room in one look. Fix it. I know you will. I'm sorry I made your job the hardest one. She held the look and gave him back the only thing she had, a single nod, the same nod she'd given him on the terrace when she felt his hand go from soft to decided. I've got it. I've got him. Go. The doors closed on him. Catherine stayed on her knees on the marble with her son shaking against her and the whole silent room around them, and she did not let herself fall apart, because there was a boy who needed at least one adult in the building still standing. She looked up once. Halden was gone from the host stand. He'd retreated toward his office, a hand to his cheek. Already, she knew, already composing the version of the night that made him the victim. Camila stood 10 feet away with tears running openly down her face, and she was looking at Catherine, and she gave a tiny nod that meant something Catherine would understand later. Where nobody had picked them up. Nobody had picked them up. 14 windows, Elijah whispered into her neck. 14, she said. You hold it. We'll give it back to him. She got them home that night through the kind of blur that memory refuses to keep. Elijah wouldn't sleep in his own room. She let him into the big bed, and he lay on his father's side and rolled the hem of her sleeve between his fingers, the way he had at 4, and somewhere past midnight he went under, and she lay in the dark and did not. The unraveling started at school on Monday. She got the call at 10, in the middle of a deposition prep, and she left the deposition. Elijah had hit a boy named Dylan in the coat line. Elijah, who had never hit anyone, who said sorry for dropping spoons. The counselor was careful about repeating what Dylan had said. Eventually, she repeated it. Dylan had said Elijah's dad was a criminal, and asked whether Elijah was going to be one too, or whether that was only the Korean half or the black half. Elijah sat in the low chair beside her with a scrape on his knuckle, and would not look up. In the car, he finally talked, in pieces, watching the window. He said, I have to pick. His voice was flat, in a way that frightened her more than crying would have. He said I can't be both, because both is the bad parts. He said the Korean part makes gangsters, and the black part makes, he said a word. And now everybody knows about Appa, because it was on the news, Mom, it was on a phone, Jaden showed everybody at lunch. Catherine's hands were tight on the wheel. She made them loosen. Which part am I supposed to be? He turned from the window and looked at her, and it was the terrace question come back wearing a worse face, The question she thought she had answered with a mantra and a city and a folded jacket, and here it was again, multiplied, exactly the way the night at the restaurant had promised it would come back. You said there's nothing wrong with me, but there's something wrong with both my halves. So what does that make the whole thing? She pulled the car over and put it in park with the engine running, and turned all the way around to face her son, and for a moment she had nothing, no argument, no case, no clean line. The lawyer had run out of words. Only the mother was left, and the mother was tired, and the boy was waiting, and somewhere his father was sitting in a room she hadn't been allowed into, holding a soft lie about soon. "Give me your hand," she said finally. He gave it. The scraped one. "We're going to fix your father's part. I already started. You'll see me do it." She turned his hand over and pressed her thumb into his palm, once, hard, so he'd feel it. And this thing about halves, about picking, her voice did not crack this time. She would not let it. "That's the same broken thing from the restaurant, baby. It's just wearing a school uniform now. Somebody handed it to Dylan, and Dylan handed it to you, and we are going to hand it right back." He looked at their two hands. How? She didn't have the whole answer. But she had the shape of it, and she had spent 11 years building a life on the difference between having the whole answer and having the next true step, and she gave him the next true step. "I'm going to prove that man at the restaurant didn't do it because your father slapped him," she said. "I'm going to prove he'd been doing it for years, to people who don't own the building, people nobody came for. And when I'm done, everybody who saw that video is going to know what really happened in that room." She squeezed. "You hold your 14 windows, I'll hold the rest." Elijah was quiet a long time. Then, small, "Okay, Mom." She pulled back into traffic. Behind them, the tower stood up out of the skyline with her husband's name on the deed and her son's question in her chest, and she drove toward the one thing she knew how to do better than anyone in any room. She did not let herself cry until the boy was asleep. Then she did, once, hard, in the dark. Then she opened her laptop. The laptop was still open at 2 a.m. when Catherine started a folder and named it nothing. No case number, no client, just a date. She did not build it like a wife. She built it like the lawyer who had once cross-examined a man 3 times richer than her until his own numbers turned on him. First the timeline, then the witnesses, then the paper. By morning, she had a legal pad filled front and back. She had also made one decision that scared her more than the rest. She would not use the security tape from the restaurant. Not first. That tape showed her husband's open hand. Lead with that, and the whole thing became a story about the slap, about a rich man losing his temper, and Elijah's classmates would be right. She wanted the other story, the one that had been running for years before her son ever dropped a spoon. So she started at the bottom. The Mirion employed 41 people. Catherine knew that number the way she knew the number of windows now. She pulled the ones who had quit or been let go in the last 3 years and found 9. She called them herself, from her own phone, on her own time. No firm letterhead, no retainer. "I'm not suing anyone," she told the first one. "I'm asking what you saw." The first 2 hung up. The third talked for an hour. By Thursday, she had done something a smaller lawyer would not have thought to do. She set up a fund. Quiet, her own money, enough to put an independent attorney beside every person who wanted to speak. No non-disclosure agreement. That was the piece that mattered. Anyone who signed one of the restaurant's exit papers had signed away their voice, and Catherine tore the muzzle off by giving them a lawyer who answered to them, not to Hanul, not even to her. "You can say whatever is true," she told each of them. "Nobody in this fund can tell you to be quiet. That's the whole point of it." That was when they started coming. Camila came first. She did not come to the office. She came to the coffee shop across from the tower on her break, still in the black receptionist dress with the collar ribbon, and she sat down and put a phone face down on the table like it might bite. I kept the schedules, Camila said. Catherine waited. She had learned, a decade in courtrooms, that the fastest way to lose a witness was to reach for the good part too soon. He seats by name. Camila turned the phone over, turned it back, a nervous thing with her hands. Not by reservation, by name. There's names he reads and puts by the window, and names he reads and puts by the kitchen. I used to think I was imagining it. Then I started writing it down. She slid the phone across. Screenshots, weeks of them. A seating chart photographed at the end of 100 nights. Catherine did not touch it yet. Tell me a person, she said. Not a pattern, a person. Camila's throat moved. Naomi, server, 2 years ago, black girl, good, fast. Customers asked for her by name. She stopped. He wrote her up 4 times in 1 month. Uniform, attitude, uniform again. Then a cash drawer came up short on her section, and he had her walked out by security in front of the whole floor. The drawer was fine the next morning. I saw the count sheet. He never changed the write-up. Where's Naomi now? She works at a diner in Flushing. She signed the paper when she left. Camila's eyes came up. The quiet paper, the one that says you don't talk. She has a lawyer now, Catherine said. Free. Hers. She can talk. Camila looked at her for a long moment. Then she told the second story, and the third. A couple, one white and one black, sat 40 minutes past their reservation, while 3 later parties went ahead of them, until they left without eating, and Halden logged it as a no-show. A boy, 16, black, accused of skipping out on a bill his own father had already paid, made to empty his pockets by the coat check, while the manager watched with his hands behind his back. Catherine wrote none of it in shorthand. She wrote it in full, in the boy's words, in Naomi's words, so that later no one could say she had shaped it. Why now? Catherine said finally, not unkind. She needed the answer on the record, even if the record was only her own pad. You saw all of this. Why come now? Camila's hands went still on the table. Because I watched you carry your own son's plate, she said, and I stood by the service door and I did nothing. I told myself it was my job. She pressed her lips together. I have a job. I'd like to be able to look at it. Catherine reached across and covered the girl's hand for exactly 1 second, the way her husband had once covered her shoulder, then took her own hand back. Some kindnesses you keep short so they don't turn into pressure. Then you already did the hard part, she said. The rest is paper. The paper came from a place Catherine had not expected. Richard Halden had made one mistake, and it was the mistake of a man who had never once believed he would be the one asked to account. He had used his personal phone for restaurant business, group texts, photos, a running thread with the 2 names above him. Catherine did not hack anything. She did not have to. Naomi, the fired server, had been added to a staff group chat 2 years ago and never removed. Everything Halden posted to that thread, she still had. And Naomi, with her own free lawyer beside her and no paper over her mouth, handed it over. Catherine read it at her kitchen table with Elijah asleep down the hall, and for the second time that week her face, the courtroom face, the face that had held through 40 floors of wind, came apart for a moment and put itself back together. The thread was worse than a temper she could have almost forgiven. A temper was human. This was policy. There was a message from Lim Jae-hyun, regional director, Hanuwal Group, the man in the slightly tight gray suit she had never met. It answered a complaint Halden had forwarded about a guest who felt slighted. Lim's reply was 3 words and a shrug of an emoji. Handle it quietly. Numbers are good. Below it, months of the same. A restaurant filing complaints into a drawer because the drawer was cheaper than the fix, and a director who signed off on the drawer because the profit line stayed clean. And there was the other name, Han Byung-cheol, the old advisor. Catherine had to search who he even was. 63, a veteran counselor to the group, the kind of man whose name appears on no organizational chart and above every line on it. His messages were fewer and older and colder. One of them used a phrase that turned Catherine's stomach in a way the slap on the security tape never had. Cliente profile. Keep the room aspirational. You know the type of guest that keeps a room aspirational and the type that doesn't. Halden had not invented the rule. Halden had been the rule's hands. The rule came down from a man with a silver-topped cane who had probably never set foot on the floor of the Mirion in his life. Catherine scrolled to the top of the thread, to the oldest night, because a lawyer reads to the beginning. And there she found the thing she would carry for the rest of her life, a photo, time-stamped 7:44 p.m. She knew the time because she had been standing at the host stand at 7:44, with her son's hand in hers, waiting for a table she had booked in her own name. The photo was of her, taken from the host stand, framed to catch her and the boy and the little dinosaur pin on his lapel. Sent to Halden's thread with Lim before she had said a single word to anyone, before Elijah dropped anything, before any spoon, any terrace, any of it. 2 lines under the photo. Should I handle this one? And then, from Lim, 4 minutes later. You know the pattern. Catherine set the phone down very gently, as if it were the boy himself, and she sat in the dark and understood the whole shape of it at once. It had never been about the spoon. The spoon was a pretext they'd been waiting for. The decision to put her son on the floor had been made in a text message before her son had done anything at all except walk in the door being who he was. She thought of every plant she had refused to pull, the time she'd told Halden to write down, the catalog she'd promised to keep, the record. She had told a frightened man in a gray suit that she did not threaten people, that she kept records. She had not known, that night, that he had been keeping one too, and that his would hang him. She did not cry this time. She had already done that. Instead, she opened the folder that had no name, and she began, at last, to name it. Sung-ho heard all of it in a room with a metal table. Catherine was allowed in for 40 minutes. She did not spend them on comfort. She put the pages in front of him, the photo last, and she watched her husband read a text message that had priced their son before he'd taken his coat off. His hands lay flat on the table. The knuckles went white and stayed white. When he finally spoke, his voice was the flat one, the terrace one, the one that had said, "You put my son on the floor." "Bury them," he said. "I can. Even from here. One call." "You could," Catherine said. "The old man especially. You have things on him. I know you do. Then let me." "No." He looked up. "If you bury Han Byung-cheol the way men like Han Byung-cheol get buried," she said, "then it's just 2 families settling a thing in the dark, and my son learns that the answer to a man who works in the dark is a bigger man who works in the dark. That's the other name, Sung-ho. That's the name you told me on the terrace you would never teach him." His jaw worked. "So what do we do instead?" "We do it in the light," she said. "All of it. The pattern, the fund, the fired girl, the boy at the coat check, and the slap. The slap helps them. The slap is yours," she said. "You did it. You already called the police on yourself once. You don't get to unchoose that now because it's inconvenient." She leaned in. "You answer for the slap, in public, on the record, with a lawyer, like anyone. That's the whole lesson, isn't it? That the rule is the same for the man who owns the building." For a long moment, the president of Hanyel Group looked at his wife across a bolted table. Then something in his shoulders let go, the same way his arm had let go under her 2 hands in the dining room, in stages. 14 windows, he said quietly. It was almost a smile. He's still holding the number? He's holding it. Then do it your way. He spread his flat hands once, the old gesture, the one that had offered a fork on a stone floor, in the light. The light was not gentle. Transparency, Seung-ho chose, and transparency cut both ways, which was the point. He gave a press conference himself, no spokesman, and stood at the front of a room and named the thing his company had filed into a drawer for years. He announced an external audit, an outside firm, no Hanul money steering it. He named Richard Halden and Lim Jae-hyun and Han Byung-cheol, and he said the word suspension, and then he said the word investigation, and he did not soften either one with a lawyer's fog. Then he said the last part, and his security team had begged him to cut it, and he kept it. I struck a man, he said, in my own restaurant. That is not discipline. That was a failure, and it was mine, and I will answer for it the way any man answers. He paused. My son watched me do it. So I would like him to also watch what a person does after. The room went quiet, the way the dining room had gone quiet the night of the spoon. Catherine watched it from the side and understood that her husband had just handed a courtroom exactly one line it could not spin, because there was nothing under it to find. The months did what months do when the paper is real. Richard Halden was charged, not for a temper, not for a bad night, but for the pattern, for a falsified write-up that cost a woman named Naomi her job, for a boy made to empty his pockets, for a drawer of complaints filed in the dark. He was detained pending trial. The gold nameplate came off the Mirion's host stand and did not go back on. Lim Jae-hyun answered to the audit and then to a prosecutor for the 3 words, handle it quietly, which turned out to mean more than 3 words could hold. Han Byung-cheol, 63, veteran of every dark settlement the group had ever made, found that the one thing his silver cane and his gold watch could not do was make a phrase like cliente profile mean anything other than what it plainly meant once it was read aloud in a bright room. He answered too. Old men who work above every line still discover the line exists when someone finally draws it in ink. The Mirion did not close. Catherine had been firm about that, and Seung-ho, once he understood why, agreed. Closing it would have let them mourn a building instead of fixing one. It was restructured, retrained, and bolted to the wall by the new host stand, where anyone could see it, was a small brass plate with a phone number on it, an independent line, not answered by anyone who worked for Hanul, where a guest or a server could report the thing that used to go into a drawer. Naomi was offered her job back. She took a better one the restaurant helped her find and mailed Catherine a card that said only thank you, and, under it, the room was aspirational the whole time. It just wasn't for me. Now it is. The boy was the longer work. You do not undo cliente profile in a child with a press conference. Catherine and Seung-ho did it the way it has to be done, in 1,000 small nights. They stopped choosing for him. When Elijah asked whether he was more Korean or more black, Seung-ho, home now, awaiting his own hearing, did not answer with a speech. He taught him to write his own name in Hangul, next to the name Walker, and told him a name with 2 strong halves does not have a weak one. Catherine took him to Naomi's diner and let him hear, from a grown woman who had been walked out in front of a full floor and come out standing, that being always there was not the wound. It was the spine. The Mirion reopened on a Saturday. Catherine wore the emerald dress. Seung-ho came in his own suit, the trial still ahead of him. No paletto removed this time, nothing to prove. And Elijah came in the blue shirt, with the beige vest and the silver dinosaur pin on the lapel, polished that afternoon, and at the door, At the new host stand, with the brass line bolted beside it, his father crouched down to his level, the way another man once had, except this man asked a question instead of giving an order. "Where do you want to eat?" The whole point was in the question. Catherine held her breath. There was a window table waiting, held, the good one, the one a boy had chosen once through a pane of glass. There was also the terrace, and every table between. Elijah did not point at the window. "The middle," he said. "The dining room, right in the middle where everybody's. Not hidden by the kitchen, not exiled to the terrace, not even the prize seat by the glass. The middle of the room, in plain sight, where the boy who was always there had decided he would simply, permanently, be." They walked in through the front doors, all three of them, the doors a manager had once decided who could pass, held open now, and no one deciding anything except an 8-year-old with a dinosaur pin choosing his own chair. At the middle table, Elijah climbed up first, unfolded his own napkin, and looked at the windows out of habit. "Still 14, he said. His father sat down beside him, in the middle of his own room, a man who would answer to a court in a month and had never once tried to buy his way out of it, and he smiled. "Hold the number," he said. The doors his father had once been arrested for standing up in, the doors a boy had once been sent away from, stood open behind them, and this time the family walked in through the front. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever walked into a room with every credential earned and still been treated as if you didn't belong? When your child asked if something was wrong with them, did you have the strength Catherine had to say the problem was never him? And when the truth was finally sitting there in plain sight, did the people in power choose to open the doors or keep them shut? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, justice, and the courage to face the truth, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel